Well, as I mentioned earlier, an advisor to Ukraine's president says the war is increasingly moving to Russian territory and it cannot be stopped. It comes as Russia is also intensifying its own air attacks, hitting Kyiv with drones and missiles in a massive bombardment overnight. Officials say 2 people were killed, calling it the most powerful attack on Kyiv since spring. And Melissa Bell is following all the developments tonight from Zaporizhia in Ukraine and joins us now live. Good to have you with us. So this was the biggest drone attack in Russia since it launched its war in Ukraine. At least 6 Russian regions we know were hit. Explain what the targets were.
Well, this is something that's been going on for some time. You mentioned what the presidential advisor here in Ukraine had spoken of, this war being brought increasingly to Russian soil. That's been a very deliberate strategy. It's about a number of different things. And whilst Ukrainians don't recognize neither confirming nor denying specific attacks, increasingly officials, including President Zelensky fairly recently, have spoken about the strategy. Bringing the war to Russian soil is, first of all, reminding the Russian people that Vladimir Putin is not keeping them safe. It is, as President Zelensky explained recently, only just and fair that just as the Ukrainian people have to suffer it, so too should the Russian. But it is also specifically, Linda, about targeting infrastructure, and specifically infrastructure that allows Russia to keep feeding its forces here in Ukraine. So when you take the attacks of last night across 6 regions, Russian air defenses fairly effective in most of them, specifically, for instance, around Moscow. The 4 airports were closed for a while, a number of planes and flights redirected, but the drones themselves were intercepted. The ones that hit the airfield, however, in Pskov made it. And what they were targeting and what they hit were transport planes that could be used to carry troops and weaponry and equipment to the front lines of Ukraine. And what we've seen over the last few weeks is oil depots being targeted, airfields, military bases, things that allow Russia to keep feeding this war. And so it is a deliberate strategy. And I think what is interesting about last night, even if the air defenses were relatively successful across most parts of Russia, that they should have managed to launch as many drones, such a large attack. And bear in mind that the airfield that we're talking about, where the airplanes were hit, is very close to the Estonian border, but some 600 kilometers from the Ukrainian. They were deep inside Ukrainian territory. In fact, the spokesman for the Kremlin was asked this morning about whether the drones might have been launched from elsewhere, from Estonian or Latvian territory, and the reply came that this would be thoroughly investigated. Another message from Moscow this morning that this massive drone attack would not be without retaliation, Linda.
And Melissa, we were just looking at some pictures from the capital of Ukraine. It was hit last night with what officials described as a massive bombardment. That attack, of course, was deadly. What are the details?
It was the largest aerial attack of Ukraine since the spring. We simply hadn't seen that sort of intensity in several months. Overall, though, again, Ukrainian air defenses proved how efficiently they were working. Of the 28 missiles that were sent and 16 drones, all were intercepted apart from one of the drones. Still, those images above Kyiv, spectacularly lit up. Of course, the loss of life that you mentioned, the debris this morning, fairly spectacular. Still, the Ukrainian defenses, fairly effective today. This is also part of a deliberate strategy on the part of Russia, and has been for many months now, of trying to hit deep inside Ukrainian territory, and perhaps all the more so, Linda, that there are now small and yet significant advances being made just south of here in Zaporizhia region by Ukrainian forces in their counteroffensive. The fighting is intense across many parts of the front line, not least the north towards Kupiansk, where Russian forces have been added to try and make a push up there. Here in the south, though, the fact that they're moving forward, something at last, a glimmer of hope for Ukraine after nearly 3 months of a counteroffensive that really hadn't gone very far. The fighting down here extremely intense, as Russian forces have also sent in reserves to try and counterattack and prevent Ukrainians from taking more territory. They insist that they are advancing meter by meter, slowly and painfully, and yet still finally advancing. Linda.
Yeah, it is good to see that there is some progress in that counteroffensive. Melissa Bell for us from Zaporizhia, Ukraine. Thank you very much.